This is why amateurs are no good. Just don't butt in. But I'll have you know we're professionals. Leave the hard stuff to us. You're still not feeling well, are you? Just rest up for now. Is this what they mean by not letting anyone have a say? At the same time, I feel pity for these in-laws. In our apartment, one of the in-laws was staying over. As their condition improved, we decided it was time for them to go home. Why did it come to this? Let me tell you the reason. My name is Chloe. I'm in my mid-30s. I used to work in an office near my parents' home. Our family consists of 3 people. First, my husband, Matthew. He worked long hours as a sales representative for a well-known company. He's in his late 30s, 3 years older than me, and we're both approaching our 40s. And we have a daughter, Zoe. A sweet, clingy little girl who is more attached to me than to her father. I grew up as an only child and always longed for siblings. Oops, I borrowed my sister's clothes. Or, I'm hiding this so my brother won't take it. I used to envy such casual remarks from my friends. I didn't want Zoe to have such longings, so I aimed to be not just a mom but also a sister or a friend she could talk to about anything. Zoe seems to understand that and really loves her mom. Recently, as Zoe turned 3 and became more attached to me, I started longing for another child, a sibling for her. My husband agreed with my thoughts and encouraged us to try together. Last year-end, we found out I was pregnant with our second child during a checkup. We were both overjoyed. It was a long-awaited event, and above all, I was delighted imagining Zoe's happy face. But I realized we had a problem to consider. Taking care of 2 children meant double the parenting work. It was impossible to look after a still young Zoe, deal with a baby, and work at the same time. So, I decided to focus on parenting. I discussed it with my husband and decided to quit my job. But there was an issue with our living space. We lived in a cramped apartment, which would feel even smaller as the children grew. We couldn't just expand our rented apartment as we wished. I talked to my husband. What about the kids' room? Here, as a kid's room. He seemed to think it was impossible. I thought so too. That's true. His opinion was only natural. Our conversation ended there for the time being. But it wasn't a problem that could just be left unresolved. I always thought about one solution. We should move. I had long wanted to move. But even if we started looking right away, would we find a place that satisfied our family? After some discussions, we decided to build a new house. This way, we could have as many rooms as we wanted and, in the future, turn them into the kids' rooms. However, neither my husband nor I knew anything about construction. While pondering what to do, my husband had an idea. Why don't we talk to Dad and Mom? His words surprised me. At the same time, the faces of those 2 popped into my mind, and I got goosebumps without realizing it. My husband's parents, my in-laws, live in another state. I heard that my father-in-law has been working in air conditioning since his youth. He's done work not just for office buildings, but also for private new constructions. It's true that they have more knowledge in this area than we do. I can't blame my husband for relying on them. Moreover, my mother-in-law has a similar background, and my FIL is the head of a small air conditioning company. Ever since we got married, I haven't gotten along well with my in-laws. There are various reasons for this. For instance, there was this time we went shopping together. I don't like to waste money. When I make expensive purchases, I check the price, online reviews, compare it with similar products for functionality, and then buy only if I'm satisfied. But the in-laws are different. That day, we went to a department store, and MIL stopped in front of a shop. I want this. She suddenly spoke in a whiny voice, like a little girl begging my Raphael. She was looking at an expensive bag from a famous brand. Which one? Let's see. After looking at it for a while, Raphael went inside the shop. Wait a minute. I tried to stop them, but it seemed like they were intentionally ignoring me. They quickly picked out and bought items without properly checking the prices. We'll buy some for you too. She said this and picked out several items on her own. However, they weren't really to my taste, even if they were luxury goods. No, I'm fine, thank you. What are you saying? You're just being shy because it's expensive, right? That's part of it, but just accept it, it's a rare opportunity. I refused multiple times. Most people would be happy, but coming from Maëlle, it felt like she was forcing me. Raphael then frowned. What's the problem? You don't like me buying for you? That's right. She doesn't like the items I choose. Here we go again. I hate being made to feel indebted. I really am fine, thank you. Come on, just accept it. My husband didn't stop them. In fact, he seemed to encourage it. I prefer to compare and choose on my own. You think you have such a good eye for comparison? This comment infuriated me. I wanted to get angry, but arguing in the store would be pointless, so I talked to the clerk and chose the cheapest wallet. But I haven't used it since I don't feel like it. This is how different my in-laws and I are. Even if we try to discuss things, we never reach a conclusion. I would prefer to live without seeing the in-laws if possible. So please, spare me. If I bring up this topic, they'll inevitably suggest living together. In fact, this issue came up before. Ultimately, my husband respected my opinion, and we didn't go through with it. I made it clear to him that we should never live together. A few days later, I started dealing with a contractor I found myself. The budget was more than I expected, but I was excited about getting the layout I wanted. However, I had to stop the arrangements with the contractor because something happened. Suddenly, I felt ill and had to be rushed to the hospital. The tests showed severe anemia. Due to my pregnancy, I was advised to rest and had to be hospitalized. It's important to take care of my health. But I'm worried about how my husband will handle things while I'm in the hospital. He might call the in-laws. And I'm also concerned about Zoe. She must feel lonely since I was suddenly hospitalized. No matter how much I thought about various things, I couldn't take any action. I had to focus on treatment, feeling frustrated. But later, I learned that my worries had become reality. As expected, my husband called the in-laws while I was hospitalized and explained the situation. The in-laws, seizing the opportunity without my permission, went ahead and discussed the new house construction with the contractor. During this time, Zoe had to live with my husband and the in-laws. But like me, she seemed to dislike the in-laws and didn't warm up to them. My husband said that probably because I wasn't there, Zoe became very scared. She cried many times, even though my husband tried to comfort her. 2 weeks later, I was discharged and my husband and Zoe came to pick me up. Zoe burst into tears of joy when she saw me. Then, when I got home, the in-laws were having a meeting with the contractor. Stay calm. Don't overdo it, you're pregnant. They said these things to me with a smile. But I thought their concern was just a pretense while I watched them. The next day, the in-laws showed me the floor plan for the property, and sure enough, it was completely different from what I had planned. Hey, this is different from the layout I thought of. I felt it was futile, but I asked my husband about it anyway. Really? I think it's fine. But the previous one seemed more livable. Dad has seen many properties because of his job. It's safe to leave it to him. As expected, my husband didn't take it seriously. I knew it was futile, but I talked to the in-laws anyway. Please don't do anything on your own while I'm away. My plea was met with a displeased look from Maëlle. She whispered something to Fael, and he stiffened. This is why amateurs are no good. Just don't butt in. But I'll have you know we're professionals. Leave the hard stuff to us. You're still not feeling well, are you? Just rest for now. Is this what they mean by not letting anyone have a say? I was angry, and at the same time, I began to pity these in-laws. For a while, one of the in-laws was staying at our apartment room, but as my condition improved, I decided it was time for them to go home. Once they were gone, I could take the lead again and focus on the new house, progressing the work that had stalled. So, I resumed my discussions with the contractor. But something felt off. I asked for a bay window here. That's not possible. Every time I met with the contractor, they became more reluctant. This was unexpected. Wondering why, I called the contractor persistently. All right, I'll explain. Finally, the contractor gave in to my insistence and explained. According to him, the reluctance was due to the in-laws' involvement. Apparently, right after returning to their home, they called the contractor and instructed him to be uncooperative with my requests, and to follow only their instructions. How much more do they intend to belittle me? I checked with my husband, but he remained clueless. He claimed ignorance about the in-laws' actions. It was the same response over and over. His attitude seemed suspicious. But with no one to consult, I had to bear the problem alone. A week later, I received a call from someone. As we talked, I arranged to meet this person. We decided to meet at a cafe, and I waited for a safe time when my husband and the in-laws wouldn't notice to leave the house. Sitting at a window-side table, the woman I was meeting quickly spotted me and invited me to join her. It's been a while. Have you been well? It's been 3 years. The woman I was meeting with was my sister-in-law, Olivia. Olivia is about 10 years older than me. She is frank, speaks her mind, and doesn't shy away from things. A successful career woman, she's someone I've always admired. We ordered coffee, and after taking a few sips, I started the conversation. I couldn't talk over the phone, but what is it about? Today, it's not about us. It's about you and your family. What do you mean? I couldn't understand her words for a moment. What could be the issue about us? Did we cause a problem or inconvenience to someone? While I pondered, the matter with Chloe's dad came to mind. Is it about Chloe's dad and them? She sighed deeply and nodded. That's when I learned why the in-laws were so proactive about our new house construction. According to Olivia, the in-laws planned to sell their current home and live with my husband. Initially, they wanted to live with Olivia and her siblings in the neighboring town, considering their old age. However, Olivia had refused this idea. She, too, didn't get along well with the in-laws. It wasn't just a matter of not getting along. Her straightforward nature was something the in-laws disliked. After being firmly rejected by Olivia, both were irate and learned of my husband's plans to build a new house. Quickly, the in-laws secretly communicated with my husband and started planning to live together. My husband intended to have me return to work soon after giving birth and eventually take care of the two of them. In return, the in-laws would give the money from selling their house to my husband. After telling me everything, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Olivia apologized. It's okay. Please, lift your head. I don't know the details, but this feels like a crime. A crime? Isn't that a bit over the top? Olivia shook her head. Just then, her phone alarm went off. Sorry, but I have to go. I've got work." She handed me some money and hurried out of the cafe. Is what she told me true? If so, what should I do? I was troubled. Even if I confront my husband with the truth, it would be futile. It would be even less meaningful to the in-laws. After much thought, I decided not to intervene despite knowing the full picture. The due date for my delivery was approaching. I had planned to return to my parents' house for the birth. I was going to take Zoe back home with me and leave the rest to my husband. After moving back to my parents' house, the new home was completed. 5 days after the new house was ready, I started having contractions and had to be hospitalized for childbirth. Unlike with Zoe, it was a difficult delivery, but thanks to the doctor's appropriate care, I gave birth safely. After the hospital, I spent a month at my parents' house for recuperation. Once I felt better, I left the children with my parents and went to our home alone. I wondered about the progress of the move. I had assumed it was somewhat complete. But in reality, my husband and the in-laws had done nothing, probably expecting me to handle it. They seemed to have been eagerly waiting for my return. The in-laws and my husband were chatting happily. I took my husband aside into another room. "What's this all about?" "I told you I don't want to live together." While clicking his tongue, my husband muttered under his breath, "What? If you have something to say, say it." Maybe this triggered him. His expression changed. "I'm living with them. If you don't like it, leave." "So, you won't give it up?" "Yeah, I won't. I'll give you custody of Zoe and them, okay?" "Don't say such unreasonable things." "I don't care. Just do your best." But as a housewife, that's probably impossible. Seeing my husband's attitude, which was a complete reversal from when we first got married, I felt disgusted. "Understood. So, is this okay?" I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag and handed it to my husband. It was a divorce application. I had struggled with the decision because of Zoe and the newborn baby. But it seemed pointless to continue arguing without any resolution in sight. While at my parents' house, I had gone to the office, gotten the divorce papers, and already signed them. My husband, suddenly presented with the papers, looked slightly shaken. "Hey, is this for real?" "Deadly serious. I'll pack my things and leave." With a resolve I had never shown before, I communicated my decision to my husband and then returned to my parents' house. Eventually, I moved all my belongings to my parents' house, and in exchange, the in-laws moved into the new house I was supposed to live in. With everything that had happened, I never set foot in it. What follows is what I heard from my sister-in-law Olivia and others who knew about the in-laws. After I started living again at my parents' house, the in-laws attempted to sell their old house through a real estate agency. But the house, lived in for many years, had holes and cracks in various walls. The kitchen and bathroom fans and faucets were rusted, and the house was slightly tilted. In other words, the house was severely aged. Such a condition meant no buyers. The price offered by the real estate agency was low. It seemed like a dream to build an ideal home, but in reality, with just my husband's income, they struggled with payments. Even with the in-laws working, the salary was barely enough for the three of them to live on. The house became neglected and soon didn't look like a new property. I received several calls from my husband and the in-laws, but I ignored them all. Naturally, there was no reason for me to help them. Years later, they desperately asked the real estate agency to sell the house for whatever they could get. They returned to the local area, but not to a single-family home. I heard from Olivia that they were living modestly in a cheap apartment. After giving birth to my second child, I spent a year living with my parents. But now, things are different. A colleague from the company where I used to work introduced me to several job interviews. I was offered a position in one of them. It's not a luxurious life. But I have my children and my parents. Even without a husband, I feel I can live happily.
Let's call the police.
The incident happened at the wedding of my eldest son and his wife. The $3,000 we, as a couple, had gifted our eldest son for his wedding had somehow been switched out like a magic trick, replaced with just $10. It was a clear case of theft. I suggested to my son and husband that we should report this to the police. Both agreed with me. However, one person, not present, voiced their opposition. My name is Natalie, and I turned 60 this year. I've been married to my husband for 27 years. Blessed with a son and a daughter, I believe we've built a modest but happy family. My daughter is already married, leaving my eldest son's marriage as the only concern. Not to say I favor him, but my son, Kenneth, is quite the accomplished young man. Kind-hearted, tall, well-educated, and well-earning. He's a son to be proud of, and naturally, I wished for his marriage to be a cautious decision. It seems he has finally found someone to settle down with. My husband and I were anxious, waiting to see what kind of woman our eldest son would bring home. Ever since our son mentioned, "I've found someone I want to marry." We didn't make any plans on the weekends, just waiting. But there was no word of any visit for an introduction. It seems my son had already visited her family's side to greet them. Certainly, it's common sense to greet the other side first with a "please allow us to marry." Still, once done, shouldn't he promptly arrange a visit for us too? I thought about urging my son, but hesitated, not wanting to be a nuisance. A month passed without any greeting from his partner. My husband, having put aside his golf plans during the weekends, was growing increasingly irritable. We wanted to avoid any conflict before the marriage, as dealing with my husband's sour mood can be quite a task. So, "I'd like you to introduce us to the person you're seeing," I casually mentioned to my son. To which my son responded with a troubled look. "I've asked, but our schedules aren't lining up," he said. Apparently, her job keeps her busy, leaving no time for a visit. When I asked about her weekends, it seems she prefers to relax then, as weekdays are hectic. It's understandable. Anyone working weekdays would want their weekends to rest. Surely, my son must feel the same deep down. He seemed to understand that this excuse wouldn't fly. Otherwise, he wouldn't look so troubled. "Look, if you're going to get married, there needs to be some formality. Please bring her home properly. If Dad gets upset, marriage will be the least of your worries," I said. My son, with a solemn look, nodded. And then, "I'll make sure to bring her for the introduction," he assured. Trusting my eldest son's words, I decided to wait a bit longer. After our talk, he contacted us the following Sunday, saying he would bring her over. When I informed my husband, he reluctantly accepted, and I felt relieved. We were both tense, waiting from the morning of that day. A little after noon, "I'm on my way now," our son messaged us. The woman who arrived was as beautiful as a model. Even more stunning than any celebrity you'd see around, leaving both my husband and me astonished. She introduced herself as Amelia and mentioned she was 4 years older than our son. At 30, her manners were impeccable, leaving a good impression. I thought she seemed like the type who could lead my overly gentle son. Apparently, she's a magazine model. "I wanted to greet you sooner, but if I don't rest enough on the weekends, it affects my work the following week." "I'm sorry," Amelia said, apologizing gracefully. Being a model, her body is her asset. It made sense that carrying over fatigue to the next week isn't professional. Will you continue working after getting married? I asked, intending it to be a light question. To this, Amelia's face turned visibly displeased. Surprised by her reaction, I was taken aback when she responded. Is that the first thing you ask when I come to greet? Yes, I plan to continue working. Is there a problem? Her sudden confrontational tone caught me off guard. Maybe the topic of working post-marriage was a taboo for her. After that, no matter what my husband and I asked, Amelia had a sulky attitude. Our son, sitting beside her, desperately tried to appease her mood. To no avail. Are we done here? I have a photo shoot on Monday, so I'd like to rest. I heard from Kenneth that you were rushing us for a greeting. Can't you consider our schedule? Maybe Natalie doesn't understand because she's never worked? Amelia said, crossing her arms and looking down on me disdainfully. Honestly, I was at a loss for words. Would someone normally act this way when visiting their future spouse's home? It was beyond my comprehension. My husband's expression also turned grim. Only the concerned look from my son, worried about me, kept me from losing my temper. He must truly care for her deeply. He certainly doesn't want a conflict between his mother and future wife before the wedding. I managed to contain my anger, hoping her attitude would change after the marriage. I'm sorry for the inconvenience during your busy schedule. We were just eager to meet the woman who would become Kenneth's wife. Sorry for insisting. I apologized, maintaining my composure as an adult. Amelia responded to my apology with a scoff. Her arrogant demeanor was pervasive. This first meeting with her turned into a bitter memory I would never forget. My son's wedding preparations progressed smoothly afterward. Though smoothly means without much consultation or reporting to us. My son had always mentioned he preferred a small wedding ceremony. He had always talked about wanting a small, family-only ceremony. But in reality, my son's wishes were completely disregarded. The wedding turned out to have nearly 100 guests. This had to be Amelia's doing. While I accepted it, thinking it was fine if my son was happy, I was concerned about her forceful approach. If things continued this way, he would always be under her thumb. I felt he needed to assert himself more. When I shared my concerns with him, he responded with a troubled smile. Sorry for worrying you. But please, let me handle this. A wedding is mostly about the bride, and I want to fulfill her wishes as much as I can. His words left my husband and me with no choice but to remain silent. Considering the size of the wedding, the expenses must be substantial. After discussing with my husband, we decided to give a generous gift. To help the couple as much as we could. On the day of the wedding, the bride and groom's dressing room was overflowing with people. Friends of the bride and groom came and went, greeting them. I even spotted some models, likely colleagues of Amelia. With so many guests, the reception was hectic, a real whirlwind. Cousins and my son's friends were managing the reception desk. It seemed Amelia's co-workers were helping out on her side. We made sure to give our gift before the reception got too busy. After the wedding, what a lavish ceremony it was, relatives commented. It had been a while since I attended such a grand wedding. The ceremony itself was truly magnificent. The incident came to light the day after the wedding. As we were finally taking a breather, our son rushed in, visibly upset. Our usually gentle son was angrier than I'd ever seen him. What are you trying to do, making me look bad? If you're against this marriage, just say it, he shouted, leaving me speechless. With a stern look, he glared at my husband and me alternately. My husband, too, was stunned. Kenneth, calm down, please. What happened? We have no idea what you're talking about. I said, trying to remain calm. Arguing back wouldn't solve anything. It was the first time my son raised his voice at us, and I was far from calm inside. My husband seemed quite shocked too. Seeing my composure, my son seemed to calm down a bit and sat on the living room sofa.
It's about the wedding gift.
He started. Wedding gift? What about it? Was there a problem? Knowing the wedding would be extravagant, we quickly decided to give generously. We had given $3,000. Was it not enough? I began to worry.
Big problem. A $10 wedding gift. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
He said, placing the envelope on the table. Indeed, the envelope had my husband's name on it. But I immediately noticed. Something was off. The handwriting wasn't my husband's.
So you're saying there was only $10 in the wedding gift envelope?
I pressed for confirmation. My son nodded and opened the envelope in front of us. True enough, there was only $10 inside.
Last night, Amelia checked it, my son explained. She was in tears, thinking she's not accepted as a wife.
Despite saying this, my son's expression showed doubt. Deep down, he knew we wouldn't do such a thing. Kenneth, do you really think we'd do this? You know this handwriting isn't Dad's, right? I responded. Hearing this, my son let out a deep sigh and slumped his shoulders. You're right, Mom.
I don't understand how this could have happened either,
he admitted, looking distraught. It pained me to see him like this. I reassured him that we had given $3,000, not the amount in the envelope.
Why is it $10? We gave $3,000.
My husband said, examining the envelope with a puzzled look. Regardless, the $3,000 was mysteriously missing. And in a way that made us look bad. Anger surged within me.
This is theft. Let's report it to the police,
I suggested to my son and husband. We didn't know where the switch happened, but we needed to clarify how the $3,000 was stolen. It hurt to suspect the friends and colleagues who had helped at the reception.
All right. I'll also contact Amelia,
my son said, pulling out his mobile phone. He seemed to be explaining that the original gift was $3,000 and this $10 was a fake. Amelia's voice, faintly heard from the receiver, sounded accusing. As if she thought I, who didn't approve of her, was behind this. It seemed she was determined to pin this on me, and the conversation dragged on.
This isn't going anywhere. Like Mom said, I'm thinking of reporting this to the police,
my son finally said, and I could sense Amelia falling silent.
Wait. This doesn't need to involve the police.
Amelia's voice became anxious. She was pleading with my son not to go to the police. Then I whispered to my son,
why not ask Amelia to come over?
I felt it was better to discuss this with everyone present. My son conveyed this to Amelia and ended the call. She arrived about 15 minutes later. During that time, my son reached out to friends and cousins who managed the reception. Without revealing the missing gift, he checked if any outsiders had accessed the reception area. Everyone said nothing unusual had happened. He only told the truth to his cousin, who then mentioned they had photos from the reception desk and offered to send them. The data arrived on my son's mobile phone shortly after. While we were checking each photo, Amelia arrived. Looking pale and without makeup. Calling the police isn't peaceful, Natalie.
Why won't you admit what you've done?
This is harassment against me, isn't it? Amelia accused me as soon as she arrived. However, I noticed her eyes darting around uneasily. Her behavior was clearly suspicious.
Amelia, calm down. Why would I do such a thing? I never opposed your marriage.
On what basis are you accusing me? As Amelia grew more agitated, I became calmer. My husband silently observed the unfolding events. I believe this is a case of theft. Someone switched our wedding gift with this fake. It's a terrible and calculated crime. I think the best course of action is to contact the police and have them investigate, I said, holding the counterfeit gift envelope. Amelia then reached out to snatch the envelope. But I was quick to protect it. It was crucial evidence. I couldn't risk it being damaged right in front of us.
No, this needs to be submitted to the police as evidence, I insisted.
Amelia's reaction convinced me, more than ever, that she was involved in this.
Are you trying to harass me by blowing this out of proportion? Kenneth told me you were kind, but this is disappointing. I'm starting to feel anxious about being your DIL.
Amelia said, now addressing my husband in a softer tone. When she realized she couldn't sway me, she targeted my husband. But he remained silent, understanding I wasn't capable of such malice. Our mutual trust as a couple made me feel relieved.
You're all being so cruel, as if I'm the liar. But isn't it Natalie who's lying?
Amelia said, tears welling up. Her tears seemed insincere.
That's right, the liar is you, Amelia.
My son calmly said, having been reviewing photos sent to his mobile phone. Amelia looked at his phone in shock, her face turning from pale to ghostly white.
These photos are evidence, Amelia. Do you have any explanation? My son asked.
Seeing this, Amelia began to tremble. My husband and I looked at the photo on the phone. It was one of the photos taken by my cousins at the reception desk. Behind my cheerful cousins flashing peace signs, there was Amelia reaching for the wedding gifts. I recalled Amelia disappearing from the dressing room in her dress for about 30 minutes, supposedly to greet friends at the reception. My son zoomed in to show Amelia's hands. In one hand, she firmly held a thick envelope, the real wedding gift. In the other, a thin envelope.
This is a fake. I would never do this. It's a doctored photo. It must be Natalie's cousins did it on her instruction.
Amelia continued with her strained excuses. She claimed my nephews, who managed the reception, had created a composite photo at my behest. I was astonished at her attempt to wriggle out of the situation. No wonder she was so against reporting this to the police.
Who would bother to do such a thing? Please, use some common sense, I replied.
I couldn't help but become exasperated listening to Amelia's far-fetched excuses. My son and husband, silent, observed the exchange between Amelia and me. Their faces screamed, were so appalled, were speechless.
Why would you do this, Amelia? Do you dislike my family that much?
My son asked, to which Amelia did not respond.
Anyway, where is the $3,000? You have it, right, Amelia? You know it was meant to be a contribution to our wedding expenses, not something for you to keep all to yourself, right?
My son probed gently, yet Amelia just hung her head and let the tears fall.
I don't want to report my own wife to the police, he said.
Then, as if resigning to the situation, Amelia began to confess. She had a substantial debt due to her extravagant spending habits, often purchasing the outfits she modeled. Her inability to resist her desires led to her debt. Moreover, her obsession with beauty treatments and expensive salon visits only worsened her financial situation. She had tried to clear her debt before the wedding but failed due to the large amount. Hence, she decided to switch the wedding gifts in a desperate attempt to settle her debts. What a blunder it was to open and switch the envelopes at the reception. She must have been panicking to commit such a mistake. Do you know about Amelia's debts? I asked my son, who shook his head in response. He then faced Amelia seriously. Let's get a divorce. I hate lies. Had you told me about your debt, we could have tackled it together. Didn't I ask you to value family? Yet, you disgraced my parents. I can't be married to you. It's over, he declared. My son is gentle, but he's decisive and stubborn about his principles. Amelia was stunned by his decision for divorce. No, it's a lie, right? I'll return the money. It was just a momentary lapse. The debt, I'll pay it off with the wedding gifts. It's too embarrassing to get divorced right after the wedding, she pleaded, clinging to my son, who remained stoic. Eventually, 3 days post-wedding, my son filed for divorce. Amelia returned to her parents' home. Initially living alone, her parents took her back to keep an eye on her. Her debt was far more than we imagined, much more than what stealing $3,000 could cover. It seemed she had plotted to shift the blame to us and drive a wedge between us and our son. Such shallow thinking. We returned all the wedding gifts we received, along with apologies. Amelia resisted, intending to use the gifts to pay off her debts, but my son didn't allow it. Her return home became the talk of the neighborhood and among friends. Embarrassed, she's now confined to her parents' house, gaining weight and with deteriorating skin. She couldn't continue her modeling career and had to resign. Now unemployed and reclusive, my son sincerely apologized for ever doubting us. He promised to be even more filial than before. Our family bond remained intact, a true relief. Next time my son brings a girlfriend home, I'll make sure to thoroughly assess whether she's the right one. My Emily is the cutest in the venue, isn't she? Daniel said with a laugh, addressing Emily. Even though I'm right in front of them, this is how they treat me. It seems nothing but a joke to me. Then Emily, seeing me, burst out laughing. What? Your wife is ugly. That's it, I can't take it anymore. I'm calling off the marriage. I said that straight to Daniel. My name is Addison. I'm turning 29 this year. I've always loved numbers, and now I work in general affairs. I think this job suits my serious nature. Currently, I'm intensely studying for a qualification. The man I was supposed to marry is named Daniel. I met Daniel at a party. I had never been in a relationship with a man before. I lacked confidence and couldn't initiate conversations with men. As my friends began marrying off, I started attending parties in a rush. That's when I got accustomed to parties and met Daniel. My first impression of Daniel was that he was cool and refreshing. When we talked at the party, I enjoyed conversing with him a lot. Daniel, an elite at a major pharmaceutical company, is the same age as me. Even his academic background is impeccable. Yet, he's unpretentious and always brings up fun topics. I mistook his familiarity with women as just an act at first. Eventually, we became a couple. I was surprised that I could become a couple with him. I thought I had used up all my luck and love for being chosen by such a wonderful person. When we became a couple, he smiled at me and said, "I'm so glad you chose me. I'm such a lucky guy." But really, I was the one chosen by him. So I said, "I'm super happy too. But why did you choose me?" I asked him. I was genuinely insecure about being a match for someone as great as him. But he just laughed and replied, "I like girls who aren't experienced with guys and seem pure. You're my ideal." "Then that's great. Looking forward to being with you," I said, smiling back at him. After that, he regularly asked me out on dates. On our third date, he confessed, and we started dating. Half a year later, he proposed. I liked him, so I immediately said yes. "That's great.
let's be happy together," he said with a smile. Living for 29 years, I had finally grasped happiness. I would become even happier after getting married. I believed so. But my expectations crumbled to nothing. Because after we got engaged and started living together, he changed. While dating, "Addison, you're really cute. My princess." He always praised me with a smile. But now, that's a thing of the past. Lately, he's always belittling me. For instance, the day after we started living together. I got up earlier than him that day and started preparing breakfast. I planned to do my makeup before leaving for work, so I was cooking without it. When breakfast was ready and set on the table, he woke up. I called out to him with a smile. "Good morning, Daniel. Breakfast is ready, let's eat together." Then he, seeing me, yelled in surprise. "What an awful face you have. A woman without makeup in the morning isn't a woman. At least make yourself presentable," he shouted, furrowing his brow. His eyes were like those looking at something filthy. In a panic, I retorted, "I was going to do my makeup later. Isn't that too harsh? You used to call me cute before we got engaged." I was shocked by his words. But he just laughed and added insult to injury. "It was just flattery to get married. Honestly, any woman with a decent income who'd do as I say would have been fine," he said, laughing. I was so shocked that I dropped my fork. At that point, I wondered if I should really marry him, but we had already paid a deposit for the wedding venue. Besides, there was no guarantee of finding another partner if I let him go. I had no romantic prospects before meeting him. And maybe, just maybe, he might return to his kinder self. Holding on to that faint hope, I had no choice but to endure his harsh words. His behavior and words became increasingly unbearable, especially concerning finances. He stopped contributing to our previously split living expenses. "Could you please contribute to the living expenses? It's tough for me to cover everything with my salary alone," I pleaded with him on a day off. But he half-heartedly dismissed me. "The wedding costs a lot, right? I'm broke from that expense, so you could at least pay the living expenses." However, he wasn't bearing the full cost of the wedding. There would be gift money, and his share of expenses should be less. No matter how I tried to convince him, he wouldn't listen. Moreover, he never helped with wedding preparations, even when I discussed the dress fittings. Even when I consulted about a dress meeting. "Why do I care about a dress? It's a woman's thing, right? You just decide whatever." That's how he responded. And there were issues with his friends too. He seemed to have many friends, as his mobile phone frequently rang. Often, calls were from women I didn't know. When I questioned him, suspecting infidelity, "They're just friends. Jealousy is unattractive," he dismissed it entirely. Unable to ask more, I was left in the dark until one night I overheard something shocking. It was when I woke up in the middle of the night. I usually slept with him in the bedroom, but that night, thirsty and awake, I noticed he wasn't there. I heard voices from the living room. He was on the phone. "Daniel?" I was about to open the door to the living room, but his words stopped me. Our apartment walls are thin, so conversations are usually audible. "I wished I had married Emily," he said, laughing. And Emily's voice, loud enough through the phone, responded, "But you'll quit your job someday, right? I want someone who can really provide." She laughed. Her voice was unbearably annoying. It was clear she was flirting with Daniel and aware of his attraction. But Daniel continued the call unfazed. "It was really great when I was dating you. You're so cute. Should we get back together?" Emily burst into laughter at his suggestion. "That would be sad for your fiancé, wouldn't it? Though I'm definitely cuter." She laughed. Daniel continued to badmouth me with ease. I shed a tear at his cruelty and whispered quietly, so as not to be heard in the next room, "Daniel, You never really loved me. I thought I could finally be happy. I cried, stifling my voice so he wouldn't notice. Unaware of me, they continued their sweet conversation. Their phone call was hellish for me to overhear. Why did I rush into this marriage? I muttered, crying. He was definitely cheating, and it seemed unlikely he'd return to the kind man he was before we lived together. But the wedding was only a week away. What should I do? I could only despair about the future. Then came the wedding day. Daniel and I were preparing in the dressing room. Our families had already entered the ceremony hall, leaving us alone. Just waiting for the attendant to arrive, we heard a knock. Come in, please. I invited them in, thinking it was the attendant. However, the person who entered the dressing room wasn't the attendant, but a woman in a pink dress. Excuse me. I froze at that familiar voice. It was the woman on the phone with Daniel that night. I instinctively knew it. As I stood there, stunned, Daniel spoke in an excited tone. Ah, if it isn't Emily. You made it here without getting lost. He said, patting Emily's head. I was baffled by his words and actions, and she looked at him and happily responded. Daniel gave me the room number. But is this woman your marriage partner? She laughed, looking at me. Yeah, that's right. Oh, really? Such a plain dress for the main character of the day. It's quite dull. She critically eyed my dress from top to bottom, irritated by her assertive words. I replied, This is the dressing room. The attendant will be here soon, so could you please leave now? I said to her in a stern tone. Then she quickly hid behind Daniel. No way, jealousy? This woman is glaring at me. It's really scary. Daniel, help me. She feigned fear. Addison, jealousy is unbecoming. She's an important person to me, don't be mean. He admonished me. He couldn't see her face behind his back, but she was smirking at me. Her flashy makeup and perfectly styled hair were apparent. She was probably around the same age as me. She spoke with a triumphant look at me. Daniel really should have married me instead. You'll get bored of such a plain woman in 3 days, won't you? She laughed. Indeed. I wouldn't choose a woman like this unless she had a decent income. She's not my type, he said, looking down on me. I remained silent on purpose. I thought I'd let them talk as they pleased for a bit longer. I clenched the hem of my dress. I really wanted to marry you. Even if we can't be a real couple, you will always be the wife of my heart. Daniel, even if you're married, we'll always be together, right? Such an ugly woman is just for the money. She laughed brightly. That's right. We'll always be together. I'll quit my job and live off Addison's money with you. He made an outrageous proposal to her. At that moment, I was on the verge of exploding. What did these two think of me? But they were oblivious to my anger. Daniel, you're terrible to your wife. Are you proposing that because I'm cuter? She asked him with upturned eyes. He nodded as if it were obvious. My Emily is the cutest in the venue, right? What do you think of Addison's face, Emily? Daniel asked with a sarcastic smile, turning to Emily. Despite my presence, this was how they treated me. It seemed nothing but a joke to me. Then Emily, seeing me, burst out laughing. What? Your wife is ugly. And she continued. Poor Daniel, marrying such an ugly woman. I'll soothe you as your heart's wife, she said, looking down on me with a laugh. That's right, isn't it? Daniel laughed too. That's it, I can't take it anymore. I'm calling off the marriage. I said that straight to Daniel. He, not taking me seriously. Really? If you cancel the marriage with me, you'll stay single forever. Because you're an unfixable ugly woman. He started laughing. Emily too. Daniel, you're too honest. I'm laughing so hard, my stomach hurts. She clutched her stomach, laughing uproariously.
After laughing, Daniel said, "A woman like you should be grateful to get married. You'll support me with your money for life." I felt a deep rage boiling inside me. Frustrated at myself for not seeing through such a person before the wedding. I clenched my fists, trying to endure. Emily, still laughing.
"Well, the wedding ceremony is about to start, right? I have to go eat my share of the celebration money, so I'll head to the venue first,"
she said and left the room. Shortly after, the attendant arrived. Seemingly unaware of the conversation in the dressing room, the attendant began preparations, congratulating us. Then the attendant started explaining the wedding. Daniel and I had chosen a restaurant wedding, starting with the reception. According to the attendant, we just had to follow the MC's lead. I listened quietly to the attendant's explanation. Daniel spoke to me nonchalantly. "Once the wedding is over and we're officially married, we'll be husband and wife. Your looks are a letdown, but I'll put up with it. After all, I have Emily." I ignored his comment. I had no intention of listening to him anymore. I was done with this man. Daniel persisted.
"Hey! Answer me."
But I continued to ignore him. All that was left was to exact revenge and denounce him and his actions. I felt a sense of mission burning within me. Then Daniel and I entered the wedding venue. The unsuspecting attendees gave us a generous round of applause. Of course, among them was Emily, smirking unpleasantly. We sat down, and the MC proceeded with the ceremony.
"Let's start with the vows. First, the groom, Daniel."
Amidst thunderous applause, Daniel began speaking. "I am overjoyed to marry Addison. I vow to love only her for the rest of my life." He looked at me with a smug face. All lies. Inside, I looked at him with a cold detachment. Amidst the applause, the MC continued.
"Thank you. Now, a response from the bride, Addison, please."
I ignored the MC and remained silent. A murmur started spreading through the venue. My parents and friends looked worried.
"Addison? Could we have your response, please?"
The MC tried to proceed, albeit confused. Still, I remained silent. The venue became more unsettled. Everyone looked at me with concern. Impatient.
"Addison, why are you silent? Just say something,"
Daniel harshly said. But I kept quiet. The atmosphere in the venue turned decidedly strange. The in-laws looked at me with puzzled expressions. Enough was enough. I had gathered enough attention. I thought so and opened my mouth. Glancing sideways, I saw Daniel relieved that I was finally going to speak. I confirmed his face and momentarily smirked. It was too early for him to feel relieved. Then I began speaking.
"I will not vow to love Daniel. I'm breaking up with him right now."
"What?" Daniel was stunned, and I casually played the voice recorder at maximum volume. Daniel and Emily's conversation filled the room.
"I really wanted to marry Emily. Even if we can't be a real couple, Emily is the wife of my heart. Daniel, we'll always be together even if you're married, right? Such an ugly woman is just for the money."
The conversation from the dressing room earlier echoed through the venue. Previously, when Daniel was on the phone with Emily at night, I felt frustrated for not having proof of infidelity. So, I bought a voice recorder. I always carried it with me, and fortunately, I managed to record their conversation today. The crowd became even more agitated. My friends looked at Daniel with suspicion. My dad seemed ready to get up and punch Daniel, held back only by my mom. My mother-in-law looked like she might faint, and father-in-law John hurriedly supported her. Emily, sitting at a table with friends, was being glared at by those around her. She was sweating profusely and looked extremely uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the recording continued to play. In this chaotic situation, Daniel, confused, shouted,
"Addison, what are you doing? Stop that voice recorder right now."
He tried to grab the recorder from me, but I swiftly dodged him.
Then I shouted loudly.
There's no way I'll stop it. Everyone needs to know that Daniel is cheating with Emily over there.
I glared at Daniel. Unable to hold back anymore, Emily shouted from her table.
You're so sneaky. Just because you get to be Daniel's wife. The one Daniel truly cares about is cute me.
However, Emily's outburst caused the venue to buzz with a different energy, whispering among themselves. Everyone, regardless of age or gender. Seeing this, Emily began to panic.
What's going on, everyone? What's the matter?
I calmly told her.
Emily, sorry to interrupt your confident speech, but I think you're the ugliest person in this venue.
Someone laughed out loud. Immediately, her face turned bright red.
What? What are you talking about? Daniel told me I'm the cutest, you know? Maybe you're the one with bad eyesight?
She retorted sharply at me. Laughter began to leak from the audience. Emily and Daniel started to look confused. Then one of Daniel's friends burst out laughing and shouted,
Daniel, you've got terrible taste in women. Liking a girl with a face like a panda. And her body's like a panda too.
Following this comment from Daniel's friend, the whole venue erupted into laughter.
What? Aren't you being rude?
Emily yelled at Daniel's friend, but her voice was drowned out by the laughter. Yes, she did look like a panda. First, her makeup heavily lined around the eyes. With her small eyes, she really resembled a panda. And her body was full-figured, making her pink dress seem tight. Her upper arms jiggled violently with every movement. I was worried her pink dress might rip at any moment. The moment I saw her in the dressing room, I realized Daniel's taste was too peculiar. It made sense why he would call me ugly. I borrowed a microphone from the MC.
She called me ugly in the dressing room, but I wasn't upset at all. After all, she is a panda. It's amusing to be insulted by a zoo animal, isn't it? As I spoke clearly, laughter erupted from various parts of the venue. Her face turned beet red with frustration. So frustrating!
She stamped her feet in anger. Daniel glared at me. I sighed heavily at the two of them.
People who cheat have no right to glare at me.
Daniel and Emily remained silent, hit by the truth. Then I addressed the silent couple.
I'll be sure to collect the engagement breakup fee from both of you.
They immediately became defensive upon hearing about the fee.
Why should we pay a breakup fee when we aren't even registered as married? I absolutely won't pay. I won't either. I'm a freelancer. I don't have that kind of money.
Emily exclaimed. The crowd looked on in disbelief at their comments. Some even chuckled at their ridiculousness. Then a person stood up and approached us.
Daniel, enough is enough.
Daniel's boss, with a red face, yelled.
Boss! This is,
Daniel, looking perplexed, tried to make an excuse to his boss. But he seemed at a loss for words and remained confused. The boss sighed heavily at his demeanor.
What an irreparable thing you've done. Cheating openly in front of Addison, maybe it's my fault for not educating you properly.
The boss said, holding his head. His face turning pale. He seemed to be trembling slightly. Emily, looking puzzled, said,
That ugly woman is from a different company than Daniel, right? Why is Daniel's boss so worried about it?
She asked, tilting her head. Sensing something off from the boss's reaction, Daniel asked, Boss, what's wrong? My engagement breakup with Addison has nothing to do with you, right? He asked nonchalantly. Then the boss, face red with anger, shouted,
Don't you know our company's board of directors? Don't you recognize Addison's dad?
He yelled desperately. Daniel looked back and forth between the boss and my dad.
No way!
He muttered. His face turned pale. My dad's face was red with rage, veins popping.
I am a director at your company. Your future will be discussed at the board meeting.
Daniel was shocked. He tried to appease my dad in a panic. Wait, please. It's too much for this incident to lead to that.
Daniel's friends were also surprised. They were all his colleagues, so bewildered by this turn of events. It's natural to be confused when the bride's dad is a director at your own company. Then my dad said calmly,
"Weren't you planning to quit the company and live off my daughter? You just played it on the voice recorder. If you're so eager to leave the company, why don't you do it now?"
That's... Daniel's face was filled with despair. And with Dad's words, Daniel's mother finally fainted. His father, John, was frantically calling her name. For her, Daniel was probably the pride and joy of the family. A well-educated graduate working in a major corporation. He must have been on a seemingly perfect elite path. But now, this incident not only derailed his elite trajectory but also cast his future into uncertainty. I had only met the in-laws once at a greeting. But they seemed like very nice and sensible people. That's why this incident must have been incredibly hard for her to accept. Daniel looked terribly bewildered by his mother fainting. And then, incredibly, Daniel yelled at me.
"If you had told me your dad was a director at our company, I would have treated you better."
He accused me, completely disregarding his own actions. He seems to be pretending that nothing happened to him. That was the last straw for me. Daniel blaming me in such a situation. I didn't care what happened to him anymore. I asked Daniel with a smile.
"Treat me better? Like contributing to our living expenses during cohabitation? Or not contributing money but at least staying out of housework? That's..."
He faltered. I exposed to everyone that Daniel didn't contribute to living expenses and yet interfered in household matters. Daniel was now subjected to even more disdainful looks from the crowd. Especially the women there didn't seem to see him as a human anymore. Maybe they thought even a weed would be better than him. Even Emily said to him,
"Daniel, you didn't pay any living expenses at all? That's really bad, isn't it?"
He, realizing the gravity of the situation, turned even paler. I smiled at him. "Good for you, Daniel.
You wanted to quit your job, right? You'll probably be able to quit very soon."
He looked around. Dad, glaring at him in rage. Friends looking at him with disdain. Emily, a bit in disbelief. Not a single person was on his side. In such a situation, most people couldn't stand it. Then he began to tremble and clung to me.
"Addison, I was wrong. Please don't call off the engagement. I don't want to quit my job."
He apologized profusely. Sweat on his forehead. It was too late for apologies. I looked at him with cold eyes. "It's over, Daniel.
After being looked down upon like this, there's no going back. Just stop it." "But..."
He looked like he was about to cry. I added the final blow.
"Freelancer Emily and soon-to-be unemployed Daniel, a perfect match."
Emily turned pale as well. If she were burdened with an unemployed Daniel, they would both be in trouble. Quickly, Emily distanced herself from Daniel. And then, Daniel collapsed, his knees giving way.
"Don't ever show up in front of me again."
I left the two of them behind and exited the venue in my wedding dress. Eventually, he left the company. The company's decision was a demotion in the guise of a department transfer. A department where his main job was sorting documents. However, many company associates had witnessed his debacle at the wedding. Leading them was our dad, a director of the company. The smart ones started keeping their distance from Daniel, and it seems he was secretly condemned by many. Consequently, he found it increasingly difficult to stay at the company. Eventually, unable to bear it, he submitted his resignation before the transfer. But leaving the company brought him further trials. It was the hefty breakup fee. The engagement breakup fee was just the going rate, not too high. But we added the wedding costs on top of it. Since the wedding turned out that way, we had to return the congratulatory money to all the guests. But the food was served, and the full cost of the wedding had to be paid. He was responsible for the disruption of the wedding, so it was decided that he would bear the cost. Daniel's parents, who were very nice people, apologized to me several times. I felt almost sorry for them. Daniel had no savings. He was flashy with money and spent whatever he had. Therefore, his parents initially shouldered the guarantee money. However, in the discussion,
"If I marry Addison, I don't have to pay, right? Then I'll register the marriage,"
Daniel argued. I felt nothing but contempt for him. And for saying that, he was severely scolded by his father, John. Eventually, an infuriated John said, "You're hopeless. I'm done with you." Daniel was visibly panicked. With no job and no home, Daniel was in a dire situation. Naturally, the apartment where Daniel and I had been living was already in the process of being vacated. I think he has to leave by the end of this month. I had already arranged movers and sent my belongings to my parents' house, leaving the apartment. After that, he kept ignoring the landlord's eviction notices. Eventually, he was sued. I found out about this because the landlord contacted me. Apparently, he had stayed there for about 3 months without paying rent. He was forcibly evicted through legal proceedings. It's unlikely that he who now disowned by his parents could return to his parents' home. Jobless and homeless, his future looked bleak. I think he has hit rock bottom. And he hasn't rebuilt anything with Emily. Through a lawyer, I demanded the guarantee money from her. I offered a condition: if she didn't reconcile with Daniel, the fee would be reduced. Without hesitation, she chose not to reconcile. "I'm not interested in someone without money or a home," she declared firmly. Apparently, Daniel reached out to her several times for help, but she ignored all his attempts. She apologized to me. "I'm really sorry. Since that wedding, everyone calls me a panda. It's been tough." I think the guests spread the word. She seemed to have realized her mistakes and reflected on her actions. But no matter her remorse, she faced constant criticism. Even at her part-time job, the panda nickname got out and she quit, being laughed at behind her back.
"I'm thinking of moving far away,"
she said. She, forced to flee due to her careless comments with Daniel. She will likely continue to be cautious about public scrutiny. A fitting punishment for her disdainful behavior. I hope she learns from this. As for me, I passed my certification exam. The qualification is for a social insurance labor consultant. Working in general affairs, dealing with payroll and entry/exit procedures, I wanted to be more knowledgeable about labor management. This will surely motivate me more in my work. Not just in work, but I've also taken a step forward in romance. After the wedding, my friends started introducing me to men, knowing I was done with parties. I was grateful for their kindness. There's one man, introduced by a friend, with whom I've become close. He's 3 years older, hardworking, and not very handsome. Rather plain-looking. He works office administration in a small to medium enterprise, nothing glamorous. After Daniel, elite and good-looking men trigger a rejection in me. So, this man feels like someone I can be myself with. It's still early to tell how it will go. But it's a step forward. I want to cherish this one step forward for the future.
"I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed."
I could hear the mocking laughter over the phone. But I didn't let out a surprised sound. I thought if I played into their hands, it would weaken my position. And by now, I had not an iota of love left for my husband, Zach.
"Okay, brace yourself,"
I replied calmly, but inside, anger was boiling over. Zach, who dumped all the childcare and housework on me, was enjoying an affair with my sister, Nicole. And Nicole too, after borrowing all that money from me, she slept with my husband and even called me an ATM at the end. It was unforgivable.
"You're okay with us divorcing, right?" When Zach pressed me, I simply nodded yes.
On the other end of the phone, the two of them cheered. Enjoy it while you can. There's no way they won't get their comeuppance for belittling me like this. I bit my lip hard. My name is Maggie. I'm 60 years old, living with my husband Zach, who's 5 years my senior. Our son, Alan, is 30 this year, already independent and out of the house. I was working part-time at a grocery store until recently, but due to the recent surge in prices, I was forced into early retirement for cost-cutting. The manager, who was very kind since I worked there for many years, even gave me a severance package despite being part-time. It's a bit sad to retire before reaching the age of retirement, but working at the grocery store definitely helped me grow. So I'm very grateful to the manager who continued to employ me. One might think I'm set for a slow life in retirement, but actually, I'm having some domestic issues. Well, more with Zach than with the household. With our loveless and distant marriage, I'm very anxious about living together for many more years. Why did it come to this? Let me start from the beginning. I met Zach over 40 years ago. Back then, I was a student job hunting, talking to various industry veterans. Most of them were seniors from the newspaper club I was part of. At a club drinking party, many alumni, including Zach, would show up. "Maggie, what kind of company do you want to work for?" Zach, rumored to be the handsome senior in the club, asked me with a comfortable distance. I honestly told him I wanted to work for a stable company. "How about the bank I work at?" "Banking's probably the most stable, right?"
Indeed, it seems like a solid job.
While my response was cliché, I was happy Zach invited me to his bank. Encouraged by Zach, I applied to his bank and got the job. It wasn't too difficult as the bank hired many students from my university. Once I started working at the bank, I realized many women liked him. Zach, always invited out for meals after work, seemed out of reach for me. But Zach often asked me out, and despite feeling guilty towards his other admirers, I started going out with him more as I was interested. So, we started dating and got married 3 years later, after which I quit the bank. It's regretful to quit just after 4 years, but back then, most women quit upon marriage. Especially since Zach and I were in the same workplace, he seemed to prefer I work part-time elsewhere. I had no regrets about marrying Zach and quitting my job. For a while, we enjoyed our life together until I got pregnant and gave birth to our son, Alan, at 30. Zach, who used to treat me like a princess, suddenly became indifferent after the birth.
"Zach, can you make a bottle for Alan?"
"A bottle? That's a mom's job. Why do I have to do it?" His sudden change in attitude left me more in shock rather than in sadness or anger. I had heard that men sometimes lose interest when their wives give birth. But I thought that was a story for only a small fraction of couples. I never imagined that Zach, who loved me so much, would suddenly cast me aside like throwing something into the open sea after I had our child. From then on, every day was a whirlwind. Zach continued to refuse to help with the baby.
"Taking care of the baby is a mom's job. Plus, you're a housewife, so it's natural for you to take care of it."
"I'm busy with work." Zach had his plausible reasons, but they didn't satisfy me.
"But it's my first time too, and raising the baby alone is hard work."
As I countered while watching Zach's reaction, he glared at me.
"If it's that hard, why don't you go to my dad's?"
"Dad's free and can help you out."
"To your father?"
"Yeah, that's right." I was utterly shocked by Zach's suggestion. Zach's mom had passed away early, and only his dad, Bob, was left, who recently had trouble with his legs and might need to go to a care facility. How could he think of leaving our child with Bob? Moreover, Zach completely refused to be involved with the baby, essentially just dumping it on his parents. Zach's outlandish idea left me troubled. Since then, I received little help from Zach in raising Alan, and I had to do it alone, repeatedly reading childcare books. Fortunately, Alan was a well-behaved and obedient child who listened to me and grew up healthy. When Alan turned 5, after sending him off to kindergarten, I noticed a call on my mobile phone.
"Maggie, it looks like Dad collapsed. I'm thinking of putting him in a facility. Can you handle the paperwork?"
"What? Collapsed? Is he okay? And about the facility?" I was very surprised by Zach's call. The news of Bob's collapse was alarming. I hoped he had been taken to the hospital in time. Given Bob's leg condition, it must have been quite a struggle. Bob had always been fond of me, treating me like his own daughter, and I regularly took Alan to visit him, even without Zach asking. The in-laws' house was about a 40-minute drive from our home. Every time we visited, "Thank you for coming all this way," Bob would say with a kind smile. Alan and I both loved Bob and, despite the distance, always wanted to visit him again and again. Hearing that Bob had collapsed, I was filled with anxiety, but Zach only mentioned putting him in a facility in a matter-of-fact tone, which irritated me.
"Just handle it. I'm busy with work, okay?"
"Wait a minute." Zach cut the call quickly after saying his piece. The idea of putting Bob in a facility was unthinkable to me. Unless it was Bob's own wish, it seemed like Zach was just deciding to put him in a facility on his own. After much thought, I decided to take care of Bob myself as soon as he recovered. When I arrived at the hospital where Bob had been sent, he was in the hospital room and had already regained his consciousness. Bob was over 70 but had struggled to continue the family's farming business despite his leg issues. Both Zach and I had asked Bob to rest, but he insisted on going to the field that day.
"Maggie, sorry for troubling you."
"No, please, just don't strain yourself anymore."
"All right."
It seemed Bob had learned his lesson this time and stopped going to the field after being discharged. Bob's field was no longer used for crops, leaving only an empty land. Though it could be revived with care, the land would probably be passed on to Zach, his only son, who I doubted would take up farming. I felt sorry for the neglected field but thought it was for the best if it meant Bob wouldn't strain himself further. After that, I started caring for Bob, visiting the in-laws' house about 3 times a week. I also began working part-time at the grocery store around that time, juggling work, childcare, caregiving, and household chores. For childcare, I switched Alan from kindergarten to daycare with extended hours, managing to make time. I worked 4 mornings a week till after lunch and then went to the in-laws' house. After caring for Bob, I would pick up Alan from daycare, go home, and make dinner. It was very challenging initially due to inexperience. Though it became slightly easier as I got used to it, I didn't realize how tired I was becoming. I had no time to talk to Zach and was overwhelmed just dealing with the tasks at hand. 10 years passed in this manner, and I turned 45, Zach 50. By then, Alan had become a teenager and often rebelled against me. But I saw this as a sign of his growing independence and, while feeling a bit lonely, I was happy about his growth. However, Alan never showed any defiance towards Zach. In fact, he hardly ever spoke to him. Zach had abandoned any childcare responsibilities from Alan's birth, leaving everything to me, so it seemed Alan didn't really think of Zach as his dad. It was around this time that our loveless and distant family relationship reached a critical point. The catalyst was a call from my sister, Nicole.
"Hi, Maggie. I just got back from a trip to Hawaii with friends and I've got some souvenirs for you. Can I drop by your place?"
Nicole, my elder sister by 3 years, has always been reckless with money and had a fiery temperament, making us quite incompatible. She always wore flashy makeup and was more beautiful than me. I was suspicious of her intention to give me souvenirs but couldn't refuse her kind gesture and agreed. When Nicole came over the weekend, she handed me the souvenirs, which I realized were not from Hawaii and were clearly common sweets available locally. I chose to stay silent, thinking that pointing this out would only upset her.
"Hey, Maggie. I'm short on cash this month. Can you lend me some money?"
Suddenly visiting with a fake souvenir and now this, I wondered what she was up to.
"Lend you money? Why?"
I suspected it was just Nicole's usual spending habits leaving her broke.
"Well, I've been feeling unwell lately. The doctor said I might need to be hospitalized. But I don't have insurance and can't afford the hospital and treatment costs."
Nicole, sounding feeble, left me speechless. What kind of illness required hospitalization? I silently stared at Nicole, who looked at me pleadingly.
"Okay. Just pay me back after your treatment.
Thanks. Sisters are the best. Nicole's face lit up as she shook my hand. Despite our differences, she was my sister and I wanted her to get well soon if she was ill. By the way, when is Zach getting back? Once Nicole knew I'd lent her the money, she casually asked this.
Zach just went to the grocery store.
Oh, I see. I'll just say hi then and leave. Right then, the front door opened and Zach returned. Hey, Zach. Oh, Nicole. You're here. Yes, just had something to discuss with Maggie. But I'm done now and will be leaving. As Nicole stood up and passed by Zach, she seemed to whisper something in his ear. After Nicole left.
What did Nicole say to you earlier?
I asked, but
nothing important.
Zach evaded the question. I remained curious but soon forgot about it. The discovery of Zach and Nicole's affair happened a month later. I planned to visit Bob that day, but work got extended, so I postponed my visit to the in-laws' house to the next day and went home as usual. Alan was at the library, so only Zach should have been home.
Why are there women's shoes here?
As I took off my shoes at the entrance, I noticed a familiar pair of heels. They were the high heels Nicole wore over the weekend. Entering the house, the living room was empty, which relieved me momentarily. But then, from the bedroom, I heard faint, indiscreet voices of Zach and Nicole.
What are they doing?
I considered confronting them right then but hesitated at the last moment. What if Zach demands a divorce after being exposed? Alan wouldn't want to live with Zach. But I wasn't confident I could afford Alan's education fees alone. If we were to divorce, I wanted to wait until Alan had graduated from college. Frustrated, I decided to leave the house, pretending I saw nothing. Instead, I gathered evidence of the affair, taking photos of their traces and secretly saving the exchanges between Zach and Nicole from his mobile phone. It appeared they had been having an affair for about 6 months. Despite the anger boiling inside me, I reminded myself it was for Alan and endured, not exposing the affair. Another 15 years have passed since then, and Alan is now part of the working world. After graduating from college and leaving his first job early, Alan set up his own business and is now working hard as its president. And as the story goes, I had retired from the grocery store, but I was working a little at Alan's company. I had been giving Nicole money for her treatment bit by bit, but when her requests became too persistent, I grew reluctant to lend more and started ignoring her calls. In fact, the signs of Nicole and Zach's affair had disappeared about a year after it came to light. Zach probably got bored of Nicole. He changed his mind and chose to stay married to me. Knowing this, I couldn't bring myself to pursue the matter of the affair anymore and decided to pretend it never happened. But I realized my naivety when I heard about Bob's death. I got the news about Bob from Zach during the day. Bob had lived a long life until 95, but I was deeply shocked by the loss of Bob, who I had cared for so long. Bob, unlike Zach, was kind and considerate, so his passing felt like losing my own parent. Yet even then, Zach said,
Dad seems to have accumulated a lot of wealth, so that's exciting.
Laughing. I was so angry that I thought of giving Zach a piece of my mind, but then I heard a woman's laughter from nearby. Oops, did she realize we're together? I was chilled to the bone at the sound of Nicole's voice. Had Nicole and Zach's relationship not ended after all? For 15 years, they had continued their affair without my knowledge. Realizing this, they seemed like an incomprehensible entity to me.
I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed.
I could hear the mocking laughter over the phone. But I didn't let out a sound of surprise. I thought if I played into their hands, it would weaken my position, and by now, I had not an iota of love left for Zach.
Okay, brace yourself.
I replied calmly, but inside, anger was boiling over. Zach, who dumped all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me, was enjoying an affair with Nicole. And Nicole too, after borrowing all that money from me, she slept with my husband and even called me an ATM at the end. It was unforgivable.
You're okay with us divorcing, right? When Zach pressed me, I simply nodded yes.
On the other end of the phone, the two of them cheered. Enjoy it while you can. There's no way they won't get their comeuppance for belittling me like this. I bit my lip hard. After Bob's funeral, I filed for divorce as promised. When I informed Zach, he seemed so delighted that it felt like he was doing it on purpose.
Now that we're divorced, you should leave this house as soon as possible.
Me leave? I asked, surprised, and Zach nodded as if it were obvious.
I'm going to live with Nicole, and you'll be living alone. This house is too big for one person.
Anger turned to disbelief, and I said, okay. Too weary to argue, and agreed to Zach's demands. Though upset, I had already considered my living situation before the divorce. Leaving our home, I headed to Alan's, who was living independently. I had contacted Alan beforehand, and he welcomed his mom, who had just left Zach, with open arms. He's truly a kind son. I resolved to work even harder at Alan's company. A few days later, a man claiming to be a lawyer contacted me. When I went to the specified location, Zach, Nicole, and the lawyer were seated.
I am in possession of a will left by Zach's dad,
the lawyer said, and took out the will signed by Bob from his bag. I was surprised as I didn't know Bob had left a will. As Zach's only child, he was the legal heir to Bob's assets. Being no longer Zach's wife, I had no claim to any inheritance. Why was I called then? As I wondered, the lawyer read the will. Its contents were astounding. Bob had left half of his assets to me. That meant the field Bob owned was now part of my estate. While Zach would inherit the other half due to his legal share, he had surely not expected me to inherit anything.
Why does Maggie get half of the inheritance? I'm his only son, I should receive it all. Dad was very grateful to Maggie for her selfless care, even though they were not related by blood. He meant it as a thank you. Bob.
I was deeply moved by Bob's thoughtfulness.
What the heck is this? I thought we could finally relax with the inheritance.
Nicole twisted her face in frustration. The lawyer then mentioned that Bob's will had also left all of his debts to Zach, but it seemed Zach and Nicole were too upset to hear that part. I was overwhelmed with gratitude towards Bob, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face.
Thank you, Bob.
Seeing me in tears, the two of them seemed to grow even angrier, but the lawyer concluded.
That is the content of the will.
With that, Zach and Nicole seemed to snap back to reality.
I'm not happy about losing half, but hey, we still have half of the inheritance left. Gotta thank the law for that. Zach said as he patted Nicole's shoulder, who nodded in agreement, right. Well, we'll be leaving now. We won't have anything to do with you anymore, so take care, they laughed loudly as they left.
I returned to Alan's house, savoring Bob's last act of kindness. After receiving the inheritance from Bob, I continued working at Alan's place without incident, and before I knew it, 2 months had passed. That's when Zach called me, on a Sunday. Alan and I were both off work, relaxing at home, but my mobile phone started ringing insistently.
Zach!
The air froze between me and Alan as we realized it was Zach calling.
Why is Dad calling? He abandoned you, and now what does he want? You don't have to answer.
Alan said so, but the phone kept ringing persistently. Irritated, I decided to answer to silence Zach.
What is it, calling me repeatedly? You said we wouldn't have anything to do with each other ever again.
I answered with a tone of annoyance, but Zach seemed not to hear me and started talking frantically.
Hey, what's going on? Why are you working at Alan's company? And why is Alan's company being featured on TV? And what's with showing your fancy house?
Zach's near-hysterical voice echoed through the phone, causing Alan to frown.
You saw the TV.
I realized why Zach was calling all of a sudden. Recently, a TV station had interviewed Zach's gym, and it was broadcast yesterday. Alan's gym, which combines a gym and cafe, had caught the TV station's interest due to its novelty. Since opening, the gym had rapidly increased its membership, and Alan appeared on TV as a successful young entrepreneur, even showcasing our home as Zach mentioned. The house we live in now, Alan's home, is quite luxurious, far surpassing the neighboring houses in size. So Zach saw Alan's house and was shocked enough to call.
"What do you mean you guys are living in such a big house? Over here, Nicole used up all of Dad's inheritance, and I even got left with his debts. Damn it, I didn't hear about that from the lawyer back then."
Zach yelled angrily over the phone. But back then, the lawyer did mention that Bob had left all his debts to Zach. It wasn't my fault that Zach had not listened, and it was none of my business.
"It's none of my business, Zach. The lawyer clearly mentioned it, and it's your responsibility for not paying attention. Besides, you knew about Nicole's spending habits even before marrying her, right? I gave her money for treatment and haven't been repaid yet. This just proves to me that you and Nicole are the worst kind of people, quick to betray someone you should trust."
In response to my correct argument, Zach remained silent, unable to say anything.
"Besides, isn't it all your fault for cheating on me in the first place? I just don't understand why I have to be blamed."
I let out my pent-up frustrations, feeling somewhat relieved. Realizing he couldn't blame me, Zach suddenly changed his tone to a pleading one. "Please, Maggie. I'm begging you, lend me some money. I was supposed to get a retirement fund this year, but I got fired, and all I'm left with are Dad's debts. Nicole left after we argued about money. How am I supposed to live now? You're my only hope. I admit I was wrong about everything. I apologize. Just give me a little bit of Dad's inheritance. You're living a good life with Alan, right? Think of it as helping someone out, okay?" His nerve to beg his ex-wife for money after cheating and leaving her was beyond comprehension. Alan, who had been listening to the conversation, looked at me, seemingly wanting to say something. I handed my mobile phone to Alan. Alan turned on the speaker and firmly said to Zach,
"Dad, you betrayed Mom and married Nicole, right? And I heard you never took care of me since I was born. I don't have any memories of playing with you after I became aware. It was always just Mom and me. On Parents' Day and Sports Day, it was always just Mom who came. That's why I'm helping Mom with my company and living with her. Why should I, who you never did anything for, lend you money? My only parent is Mom. I won't give you a single dollar."
Alan's strong, businesslike tone choked me up. I could sense Zach gasping on the other end of the phone.
"Alan, how could you say that to your dad? Fine, I won't rely on you guys ever again. Don't insult me."
With that, Zach hung up. We looked at the silent mobile phone and then burst out laughing together.
"Zach begged us for money, and now he says he won't have anything to do with us. What an idiot. Yeah. Dad has always been like that, getting angry without thinking ahead."
As we discussed Zach's foolishness, the phone rang again. It was Zach. He probably wanted to ask for money despite saying he wouldn't contact us again. Fed up, I blocked Zach's contact.
"That's it. Now that fool can't bother us anymore." "Yeah. Thanks, Mom."
His gratitude for being raised seemed implicit.
"I should be the one thanking you. You've given me such a great life. No matter how old you get, you're still my precious son."
We reaffirmed our bond as mother and son, grateful for each other's presence in our spacious home. A few days later, my sister Nicole called me. Her request was almost identical to what Zach had said. I couldn't fathom lending more money to Nicole, who hadn't even repaid what she owed me. In fact, I hadn't yet demanded compensation for her affair with Zach, so I successfully sued both of them for damages through a lawyer. They ended up getting divorced after being married. Their marriage only lasted for 2 months. Zach was even worse off than Nicole. The negative inheritance he received from Dad was too substantial. Bob had borrowed a lot of money for farming, managing it all by himself. I hadn't known about it. While caring for Bob, he often complained about Zach. Bob was able to forgive Zach for not taking over the farming business, but the fact that he didn't take care of Alan and not visit his own father was unforgivable. He was also furious with the way Zach treated me, and I always tried to soothe him, saying it was okay. If kind Bob was that angry, Zach must have been quite a negligent son. All of Zach's expected retirement funds were gone due to his dismissal for misconduct. Rumor has it he even tried to embezzle money from his bank to pay off his debts. Had he just worked quietly until the end, he would have received his retirement money. His greed was his downfall. Now, while receiving a pension, he seems to be working 3 part-time jobs to pay off his debts. Starting a new job at 65 and being taught by younger people as a newcomer must be shattering his pride. Although he has worked as a bank employee for many years, his part-time job as a new employee involves a lot of odd jobs. A hard adjustment for someone who never did housework, childcare, or elder care. He'll likely give up soon enough. For Zach, who neglected his son and cheated with Nicole for years, it's a fitting punishment. I hope he manages until the end. As for me, I'm still working energetically at Alan's workplace. The staff, who are around my child's age, treat me very kindly. Our workplace is always full of smiles, attracting many customers. Alan recently got engaged to a girl a year younger than him and introduced her to me. She's a wonderful, sensible young lady. Well respected at work. I was planning to move out when they married, but she insisted we live together. I'm grateful for her kindness and looking forward to our future together.
The baby was adorable, wasn't it? I can't believe you had the nerve to say that. I know everything. You both think I'm clueless, laughing carelessly, but I'm about to show you a grim reality. I understand that a newborn life is innocent, so I feel sorry for the baby. But I hated you two even more. I know you both have been deceiving me. You'll learn that angering me is a terrible mistake. My name is Roseanne. I married Louis, who I met through business at my company 3 years ago. Our first encounter was 5 years ago, just a passing moment at his company, with no further interaction. However, it turned out we lived nearby, and we bumped into each other again. We had tea, got along well, and started dating. After a year and a half, we married 3 years ago. I work at a company my dad founded. Since graduating from college, I've been working there, known as the boss's daughter. This label has kept others at a distance from me. But Louis didn't seem to care about that and was very friendly. Just being treated that way made me feel really comfortable around him. By marrying me, Louis is set to become the next president of the company. He's been working hard at his current company since graduating from college. He's a charming and competent person, as I observed from his interactions with his coworkers. Though he's not of age yet to take over, the plan is for him to work until he's 40 and then become the next president. Also, considering my age, I wanted to start preconception care right after our marriage. But Louis was often busy with work, coming home late at night. On days he wasn't busy, he'd go straight to bed, too tired. I couldn't impose on Louis, who was working hard. And before I knew it, 3 years had passed, and I was 37 years old. One day, my best friend Alice called me out, and we met at a nearby cafe. Alice and I have been close since we were 13, always sharing news and consulting each other on problems. She saw me not just as the boss's daughter, but as a person. It's been a while. What's up? It's been a while. I have something to tell you today. What? Are you getting married? Actually, I'm pregnant. 6 months now. I was shocked. I hadn't even heard she had a boyfriend. And now this? But now that I think about it, her belly did seem a bit fuller last time I saw her. So that's what it was. Is it a marriage after the baby's arrival? No, I can't marry the father due to some circumstances. Oh, I see. But congratulations anyway. Thank you. Alice looked downcast. She must be feeling anxious. I didn't know what her situation was, but I was ready to do anything I could to help. Alice had always been there for me. After every breakup, she was the one to comfort me. I think I made it this far because of Alice. Alice, if there's anything I can do, just tell me. It's my turn to support you now. Thanks, but I'm okay for now. Do you have any troubles, Roseanne? No, I'm fine. I wanted to talk about wanting a child, but the atmosphere didn't feel right, so I didn't. But what happened next would drastically change my life. When I got home, I told Louis, who was off work and at home, about Alice. Since the three of us often hung out together, Louis knew Alice well. Alice is pregnant. Is that so? Louis didn't seem very surprised. It was as if he wasn't much interested in the news. But she can't marry the father because of some issues. I didn't get the details, but I told her to ask me for anything she needs. I wonder if she'll be alright. She'll be fine. The father will probably provide financial support, right? I hope so. But if he doesn't acknowledge the baby and she plans to raise it alone, it's going to be tough financially. I was genuinely worried about Alice, but Louis's response was too nonchalant. If Alice has decided that, there's nothing you can do. It's her decision to make. That's true, but I want to start thinking about having our own child soon. Let's talk about that some other time. Why do you always avoid the topic of children like this? He showed little interest in Alice's situation and always evaded the conversation about children. Moreover, I'll be home late, so don't wait up for dinner, Louis would suddenly say. When I asked him to tell me these things earlier, he'd get angry and say, I'm busy, unlike you, and I couldn't say anything more. Indeed, I've been leaving work on time lately, without any overtime. But I don't like the implication that working overtime is somehow more commendable. I just managed to finish all my tasks within the allotted time. Of course, in today's world, there are companies where working overtime is the norm, and I'm not condemning overtime itself. But I never had to do so much overtime before we got married, and being treated this way is really stressful. Louis, being a man, probably doesn't worry about age, but I'm already 37, you know. If we don't start preconception care soon, it might be too late to have children, right? Louis spends his days off either relaxing at home or going out alone. It feels like he's deliberately avoiding spending time with me, which only adds to my stress and frustration. That day, too, Louis had left early without saying where he was going or when he'd be back. Sometimes I wonder if there's any point in us living together, but I've gotten used to such things. Today, a bit early maybe, I decided to pick out a baby shower gift for Alice and reached for my phone. Oh no, it's not charged. Darn it. With no other option, I opened Louis's laptop. The password was his birthday, I remember. With that, the lock opened, but what I saw on the screen made me doubt my eyes. Shall we go to a shop in the next county today? They have cute baby stuff. It was a send messages screen, and the first message I saw was from Alice. Maybe Louis had known about it all along and went shopping with her today. But then why didn't he tell me anything? With a sinking feeling, I scrolled through Alice and Louis's send messages history. My fears were confirmed. I was feeling sick and went to the doctor. Turns out I'm pregnant. Remember when we met 2 months ago? I think it's from then. Really? It's my child? I'm so happy. Louis wouldn't engage in preconception care with me, but he was having an affair with Alice and even fathered a child. Roseanne won't suspect anything, will she? She's clueless, lol. These were the previous messages. Reading further, it appeared that Louis was meeting Alice on the nights he claimed to be working late. I checked Louis's bank account and payslips. It became clear why he stubbornly refused to show me his payslips or bank account. He wasn't working overtime at all. If I noticed a lack of overtime pay, I would have gotten suspicious, so he kept them hidden. We have an arrangement where we pay for personal expenses individually, and we split the living expenses. Neither of us knew exactly how much the other was earning. This was the first time I saw Louis's salary. It was significantly lower than mine. 35 years old, a college graduate, and this is his salary? I was shocked, not just by the surprisingly low salary, but also because almost the entire amount was being withdrawn every month. It seems likely that Lewis has no savings left, probably using it all for Alice's childbirth expenses. There's no way he'd consider preconception care with me, not just financially, but because it's clear he sees Alice, not me, as his partner. He says, "Once I become president, I'll lavish Alice and the baby with luxury. So just wait a bit longer. A child with Alice is bound to be adorable." Yeah, that's the situation. He married me just to become president and for the money. Thinking back, he was incredibly devoted until we got married. Even in his proposal, in front of a castle in a dreamy setting, was so romantic. But as soon as we got married, he became cold and stopped going out with me. Seeing their exchange, I was furious. I've been deceived by both of them. And Alice, she even had the nerve to report her pregnancy with Lewis's child. Did they think I'd never find out? If so, they underestimated me. Well, I hadn't noticed anything until I saw the send messages. I decided to gather evidence, so I hid a small voice recorder in Lewis's bag. Oblivious, Lewis left the house silently again. I knew from their send messages that he was meeting Alice today. I had set up the send messages app on my phone with Lewis's account, allowing me to see every exchange between him and Alice. It felt like stalking, but I needed evidence for what was to come. While Lewis was changing, I set the recorder in his bag to record, and he unknowingly took it with him to meet Alice. When he returned, I secretly retrieved the recorder, but the content recorded was beyond my imagination. The conversation started off innocuous, but what followed was unbelievable. "Can't believe Alice was the one stealing all your girlfriends." "What?" "That's right, but my aim was just to take them, so I dumped them right after." "Why did you do that?" "Consoling a heartbroken Roseanne made me feel fulfilled. I felt like I was doing something good." "What's that supposed to mean? Was Alice stealing my boyfriends just to fulfill her own heart?" Their conversation, laughing and chatting, filled me with rage. "Lewis, you're not planning to have a child with Roseanne." "No way. I'm not interested in her at all. I just used her to become president. My type is you." "If Roseanne hears this, we're in trouble." I stopped the voice recorder after hearing all this. I was so angry I almost smashed the recorder. Alice had been deceiving me all along. She comforted me when my boyfriends broke up with me, using me to satisfy her own ego. I can't forgive Lewis or Alice. Lewis, a liar who used our marriage to become president. And Alice, who I thought was my best friend, stealing my boyfriends, one after another, and eventually even my husband, to have a child. I won't let these two get their hands on my dad's company or its money. From that day, I decided to thoroughly gather evidence of their affair. I screenshot and copied all the send messages and hired a detective. Someone I knew, but hadn't fully trusted in detective matters. However, they turned out to be quite capable, gathering a lot of information. As expected, on the days Lewis claimed to work late, he was mostly visiting Alice. The photos showed them walking together like a couple, Lewis caressing Alice's belly, seemingly eagerly awaiting the baby's arrival. Seeing this, my determination to make them pay began to waver, and sadness welled up inside me. This should have been me and Lewis, but I couldn't let my resolve falter now. It was all for protecting my dad's company and for my revenge. However, the child in Alice's belly was innocent. At the very least, I didn't want to involve the unborn child in this turmoil. That was the only thing troubling my conscience. 4 months passed since then. Send messages, voice recordings, photographs, with all the evidence in hand, making their excuses impossible. I received a message from Alice. She was in the hospital, and it was her due date. "It seems like labor has started. I'll let you know once the baby is born. Wish me luck." "Good luck. I'll come to the hospital when you contact me. With your baby's father." The next day, Alice informed me the baby was born. She endured 5 hours of labor. "Alice's baby is born. Shall we go see?" "You're acting calm, but you're excited, aren't you?" "I know you were sending joyful send messages just now." Holding all the evidence, I went to the hospital with Lewis. We visited the newborn room and saw Alice's baby. Adorable, but I couldn't dare say it aloud. This child was born from those two, a testament to their infidelity. Then, returning to Alice's room, she was waiting with a beaming smile. The baby was cute, right? Lewis nodded with a smile, turning to me as if seeking arrangement. The baby was adorable. No, it was as ugly as you. What? As they stood there dumbfounded, I was ready to begin my revenge. Hey, that's rude. And what do you mean it looks like me? Roseanne, what's wrong? You thought I knew nothing? You think I'd say something so awful just on a hunch or speculation? As I spoke calmly, their faces tensed slightly. What do you think you know? Alice tried to maintain her composure, but Lewis clearly started to get nervous. First, here's a picture of you two walking closely together like a couple at a baby store in the next county. I presented the photographs one after the other, as if I was showcasing items in a home shopping program. Next, we have the send messages exchanges you two made a point of having. I placed the copies of the send messages on the table. You used my computer without permission? My phone was out of power and I just wanted to borrow it for a moment to look for a gift for Alice's baby. Then your send messages with Alice popped up as soon as I opened it. Alice showed a look of disbelief that Lewis had left the send messages screen so carelessly open. Did you think I wouldn't see it? Everything was left open, so I took the liberty of viewing it and copying it all. This is ridiculous! Predictably, Lewis tore the send messages copies on the table into pieces. Hey, if you do that, unfortunately for you, I've also saved these send messages as data, so tearing them up is pointless. Plus, I have voice recordings from when you two went out. I wish I hadn't heard them. Of course, I had backups of everything safely copied onto my computer. I'm sorry. It was just one time, and then I got pregnant. One time? That's not possible, right? These send messages suggest at least 5 encounters before the pregnancy. And I played the voice recording. Hey, do you think we can make a second one even while you're pregnant? Stop it. Can I go to Alice's place after this? Sure. I pressed the stop button on the playback. What's the meaning of this? Alice's expression was clearly strained. Alice, I always thought of you as one of my few close friends, but after hearing the conversations recorded on this, I realized you were just using me to satisfy your ego. I never imagined you'd been stealing all my boyfriends. Wait, there's a reason for that. I was being harassed, and they ordered me to steal Roseanne's boyfriends. Such an obvious lie. I couldn't believe it. Can you still say that after hearing this? I played Alice's voice from the recorder, gleefully talking about stealing boyfriends to satisfy her self-esteem. You heard that too? Pretty much all your conversations from the past 4 months are recorded. Wait, that's eavesdropping, right? Eavesdropping evidence isn't admissible, is it? Lewis said this smugly. You know, as long as the recording wasn't obtained by illegally installing devices in someone's house without their consent, or by threatening them, it's perfectly valid evidence. So that's it? Lewis always misses these details. The two were at a loss. Now that I've presented irrefutable evidence, it's time to demand compensation. This will mark the beginning of hard times for them, as the amount they owe is something they can't pay without working hard. Now that you see all the evidence, you understand, right? You'll have to pay the compensation in full. Wait, I just had a baby. I can't afford to pay compensation. Alice panicked first. I expected this reaction, knowing she had just given birth and would have childbirth expenses and upcoming child costs. Then you'll have to leave the baby with your parents and work, won't you? That's impossible. Well, telling your parents that the baby is the result of an affair with your best friend's husband, and you need to pay her compensation? I wonder if they'll agree to take care of the child without question. With that, Alice turned to Lewis, probably hoping he would cover the repayments for a while. Just so you know, relying on Lewis's salary is futile. His pay doesn't even reach $2,000. Alice's eyes widened in shock, as if hearing this for the first time. What? You said you make over $3,000 a month, and more with overtime. Alice confronted Lewis. Lewis started to act nervously. It was just a bluff. When we started dating, I asked a coworker in my department to talk me up as some kind of company elite, but it was all a lie. I placed Lewis's payslip on the table. The payslip revealed that he was just a company underperformer, always making mistakes and still requiring his boss to check his work. And you're still lying, aren't you? I said, looking at Lewis. I told you, I've been working at this company since college graduation. But the truth is, I only have a high school diploma, and I joined the company just before meeting Roseanne. I've been job hopping a lot because I get bored easily. As Lewis confessed, Alice's anger seemed to rise. Wait, everything you said is different. You told me you were saving money. How are we supposed to live on less than $2,000 a month? I didn't expect it to be revealed. I thought I'd figure it out after becoming president. I was speechless at their absurdity. After Alice made a scene, I spoke again once she calmed down. Anyway, I'm divorcing Lewis, and of course, there's no chance of him becoming president. The thought of entrusting my dad's company to someone so incompetent is terrifying. I'm glad I realized this early. I'm going to meet my lawyer now to discuss the compensation claims and the divorce procedures. Wait, I'm sorry. I'll change. Please forgive me. Lewis begged, his apology more pitiful than I'd ever seen. His insincere apology couldn't sway me. I'll never believe a word you say again. With that, I left Alice's hospital room. Later, the divorce was finalized, and both were billed for compensation. I thought they might end up together, but apparently, Lewis was cheating with another woman. Alice, furious, broke up with him impulsively. However, Alice, who had no savings and was now in debt while on maternity leave, couldn't afford to raise the baby. Her family, as expected, refused to help. Relatives even suggested she put the baby in a facility, but Alice insisted on raising the baby herself. Then, unbelievably, Alice came to me. Don't you feel ashamed? Roseanne, this is a once-in-a-lifetime request. Please take care of my child until I'm financially stable. What are you saying? Of course not. Please, you're the only one I can turn to. This child has the blood of the man I once loved. You can love it, right? If it weren't for the baby being there, I might have lashed out and verbally attacked her, but yelling in front of the child would only instill fear in them. I controlled my anger and spoke calmly. There was a time when I truly loved you, but after your betrayal, I feel nothing but hatred. Just knowing you two are the parents fills me with resentment towards this child. Even if I took care of it temporarily, you'll probably find a new man soon enough, and your affection for this child will fade. That's not true. I can't bear the thought of never seeing my child again. Then, instead of relying on acquaintances, seek help from proper institutions. Do you really think there's someone kind enough to take care of a child born from an affair with our best friend's husband? Besides, your reason for not wanting to let go of the child isn't love, is it? What do you mean? You've been telling people at work that you plan to make this child a kid YouTuber to earn money. You even said you'd eventually join in and have fun as a YouTube family. But now it's impossible, right? If people realize this child is the result of an affair, you'll be caught in the social media firestorm. There are people who can trace personal information, and if that happens, it's not just you who will suffer, but this child too. Alice fell silent, her head bowed. What, you're still holding a grudge about me stealing your boyfriends? That's irrelevant now. As for Lewis, he's beyond redemption, and I pity him. My concern is for the child. Being with you will only bring it hardship, so it's better to let it go. And by the way, I've told everyone I know that your child is with my husband. That's cruel. Alice started crying. Cruel? Look who's talking. I continued, undeterred. Anyway, it's impossible for me. With that, I left Alice's presence. Later, Alice placed her child in a facility and returned to work, foregoing her maternity leave to repay her debts. Despite the turmoil and relentless gossip at work, Alice showed remarkable resilience. However, her job alone wasn't enough, so she started taking on additional work on her days off. And, as expected, she already had a new boyfriend. Placing her child in a facility was the right decision. Lewis, having lost his place in the company, resigned and was now repaying his debts through various part time jobs. It goes without saying that they haven't met since then. I have no interest in his affair with the other woman. In the end, they both worked tirelessly to repay the loan they took out to pay my compensation. It's a satisfying outcome. As for me, with Lewis out of the picture, I've become the next candidate for the company's presidency. My parents apologized to me. We should have chosen you from the beginning, regardless of gender. If only we had seen through that man's lies. We are sorry, they said. I was the one who was completely deceived, yet my parents had done nothing wrong. I felt ashamed for making them think that they were at fault. But now I'm determined to elevate the company's performance even further as its president. Happiness for a woman isn't just about marriage or children. I'll find my own way to happiness and repay my parents' kindness.
Ah, so that's what it was. As I glimpsed at my in-laws' house from a distance, the moment I touched upon the truth, I was speechless. What had Tad and his family been thinking when they looked at Violet all this time? How many times had they deceived Violet with a calm face? Unforgivable. I will make sure you all fall to hell, no matter what. My name is Scarlett. I'm 45 years old, struggling with a zipper around my stomach on my ceremonial clothes that I haven't worn in a long time. I thought I hadn't changed much in appearance since my younger days, but clearly, I've accumulated visceral fat. I first wore this outfit when I was 30. My younger sister Violet, who had a weak heart since childhood, passed away at the young age of 27. She died of heart failure after complications from pneumonia. Miraculously, I was the only one who had a conversation with Violet on her last day, as I happened to visit her in the hospital. She had only been married for 2 years. She must have had so many things she wanted to do. She couldn't have imagined leaving this world like this. Remembering Violet's smile, saying she wanted to walk under the autumn leaves after being discharged, filled me with a heavy heart. On the day of the funeral, still unable to accept the tragedy that befell my dearest sister, an incident occurred. It was just before the ceremony started. I went to the bathroom, and there was Tad, Violet's husband, talking on the phone at a nearby rest area. Yeah, I think things will settle down a bit after the funeral and the 49th day memorial service. Yeah, well, I guess I should keep it low until the first anniversary. I normally don't eavesdrop on people's phone calls, but this time I couldn't help but be concerned. What does he mean by keeping it low until the first anniversary? That's surely about Violet's. Tad's casual tone didn't seem like a conversation with a colleague. All the in-laws were attending the ceremony. Who was he talking to? Sorry to keep you waiting. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, no, the kid is fine. They haven't figured it out yet. Neither Violet nor her family have any clue that I have a child. Just stay relaxed at home. What? I was stunned. Did he just say he has a child? Violet and Tad didn't have children. They chose not to because of uncertainties about Violet's health during pregnancy. They were both in their first marriages, and we had never heard anything about Tad having a child. What on earth is going on? Honestly, Tad's incomprehensible conversation only confused me, and I couldn't gather my thoughts. But then I suddenly remembered the words Violet desperately tried to tell me just before she was taken to the operating room. Parents home. A child. Soon after, Violet lost consciousness and passed away without waking up again, so I never heard the rest. And I was the only one who heard those words. Until now, the shock of losing Violet was too great, and I didn't have the capacity to consider the meaning of her words. But the words parents home from Violet and Tad's just relax at home? If it was the house they lived in, Violet would have said home, not parents' home. And there are no children at our parents' home. Thinking about it, I realized something. Could it be that the person on the phone and Tad's child are living at Tad's parents' home? Once this thought struck me, I couldn't stay still. If this was true, I couldn't forgive Tad. Eager to verify my suspicion, I left the funeral home right after laying the flowers for Violet and headed straight to Tad's parents' home. Tad's parents' home is within walking distance of the house where Violet and he lived. Tad himself said he wanted to live in this area because, I'm an only child and my parents are elderly, so I want to live near them. Violet, though living near her in-laws, often expressed her concern, saying, I'm worried whether we can manage with the increased family interactions. But in reality, they hardly ever visited and had almost no family interaction. Perhaps that's why at the funeral, Tad's parents hardly seemed to mourn Violet's passing. I was a bit appalled at how they were constantly fiddling with their mobile phones. Well, if their relationship was distant, perhaps this is to be expected, but they could have hidden their true feelings a bit more at such a time. Thinking about their attitude, I hesitated to ring the doorbell at Tad's parents' home. Normally, no one should be in the house. Everyone should be at Violet's funeral. But what if someone comes out? What should I say? I still had no evidence of Tad's infidelity. Facing an enemy in a state of insufficient information, I wasn't confident I could win. While pondering, I sneaked around to the garden and peeked inside the house. The windows were open, and I could see inside clearly. What? Is someone really there? I was startled at that moment. Wait, don't run around. Come here. Don't be wild. A child who had just come out into the garden making a commotion was followed by an unfamiliar woman. I quickly hid and watched the two of them from the shadows. The child's face looked a lot like Tad's. His steps were still unsteady. He must have started walking just a few months ago. The woman was about the same age as Tad. The area around her mouth indeed resembled the child's, making it clear that she must be the mother. Ah, did that man truly betray Violet? Since when? When did Violet realize it? Though the puzzle pieces in my mind fit neatly, more troubling thoughts emerged, and I couldn't feel any relief. Instead, tears started to form. I won't forgive him. In Violet's place, I will definitely bring that man down to hell. I vowed to do so. Later, I returned to the funeral home and received Violet's remains. Everyone suspected me for leaving the ceremony, but they seemed convinced when I said I couldn't stay there due to the shock of losing Violet. I was relieved that no one seemed to suspect that I went to Tad's parents' home. I didn't want Tad or the in-laws to harbor any strange doubts. The next day, I immediately decided to hire the only investigation service in the area to investigate Tad, and it turned out to be run by Violet's friend Riley. I remembered her well since she attended the funeral. Riley revealed that Violet had also hired her company to investigate her husband. After I told her the results of the investigation, Violet fell ill and passed away. I have a duty of confidentiality, but she loves you very much, Scarlett, so I think she would forgive me for telling you. Riley then explained the background and results of the investigation Violet had requested. Once, Violet and Tad almost broke up during their engagement. The cause was Tad's so-called cold feet. With the wedding application done and only half a year left until the wedding, he said, I'm not so confident I can protect Violet with her weak heart. I want some distance. Violet, after much thought, agreed to his request and they took a break. But after about 2 months, Tad came back, apologized, and said he wanted to marry Violet after all, so they smoothly proceeded to the wedding. After that, Tad, who had caused Violet so much trouble, said he wanted to gift her a house in the future and worked tirelessly even on holidays. Thanks to all this, it seemed that Violet and Tad's time together had greatly reduced. But Violet spoke of it as if it were something sweet, saying, We'll be fine. Won't we? I thought of it fondly, but actually, Tad had started an affair with a childhood friend, Nova, soon after his engagement to Violet. Though they had dated before, they broke up over trivial disagreements. He later met and got engaged to Violet, but Tad was still hung up on his childhood friend. Then, after the affair rekindled through contact from her, they resumed their illicit relationship. Moreover, his cold feet was a lie. Around that time, Nova became pregnant, and Tad, torn about divorcing Violet and marrying her, had apparently confided in some friends. The mistress insisted, "I won't ask for marriage as long as you stay with me, but I will have this child." He didn't want to leave her, nor did he want to tell Violet, his lawful wife, about the outside child. He couldn't deny the child of a woman he loved. She was adamant about having the child, despite his wish against it. Tad, unable to find a way out and troubled, consulted his parents. Shockingly, they said, "It's our first grandchild. Let her have it." His parents had always preferred Nova, whom they knew well from childhood, over Violet. Moreover, they seemed displeased with Violet for her family, often complaining about not being able to see grandchildren. "Fortunately, Violet is frail. She'll pass away soon. Then acknowledge the child and remarry Nova." The mistress wholeheartedly agreed to this outrageous plan. For Tad, it was a favorable proposition. Convinced by his parents' words, he agreed to let Nova have the child. Nova, an only child like Tad, had lost her parents. Thus, Tad's mother and father frequently stayed at the mistress's house, taking care of her before and after the birth. Tad's claims of working on weekends right after marrying Violet were false. He was likely visiting his newly born child. Neighborhood witnesses claimed to have seen Tad frequently visiting Nova's house. It seems the move, supposedly for his elderly's parents' concern, was a lie, more about being close to see his child. As the child grew, to see the grandparents' growth up close, they spent more time at Tad's parents' home, as per the in-laws' wishes. Hence, coming up with various reasons, he kept Violet away from the in-laws' house, resulting in no visits at all. It's appalling how the family condoned the affair. Violet only discovered Tad's infidelity about a month ago. Feeling unwell, Violet had come home early from work and was sleeping. Tad probably didn't realize Violet was there. Normally, Tad hardly ever messaged or called in front of Violet, but on this day, he returned home a bit earlier than usual and made a phone call somewhere. "I got off work early. Can I come over now?" Violet? She's at work, so she won't find out. She's been falling ill easily lately and goes to bed early. I'll just say I'm working overtime and stay longer. Yeah, I also want to live with Nova and the others soon. Every time she's sick, I keep hoping it won't be long. Yes." Violet, lying in her sickbed, heard this. The pain in my heart is unimaginable, just thinking about what she must have felt. The incident led Violet to realize Tad's infidelity and hire her friend Riley's investigation service. The investigation results were out, and just as she was about to confront Tad with divorce, she collapsed and never returned. After telling everything, Riley said, lowering her eyes, "Violet must have been so frustrated," and lowered her eyes. "Exactly. I want to avenge Violet's grudge. I couldn't let the in-laws get the grandchild and Tad remarry. But just grasping the situation, I didn't know what to do. After some thought, an idea struck me. Riley, are you good with computers?" At my words, Riley smiled and answered, "Leave it to me." The next day, I headed to Tad's parents' home. When I rang the doorbell, Mother-in-law appeared surprised. "Oh, Scarlett, what brings you here?" "I have something to discuss about Violet's belongings with the family. Is now a good time?" Mother-in-law went silent, then the presence vanished. Maybe they won't let me in. While I was a bit anxious and waiting, "Sorry, Scarlett, I was just tidying up. Please come in." Tad appeared. "Oh, Tad, you're here. That's good." My smile made Tad's expression stiffen. He thinks I'm unaware of his affair, but his guilty face says otherwise. In fact, I had just seen the mistress and child through the window. He must have tidied up them. Wonder which room they're in. As I was ushered into the room, the in-laws and Tad looked at me uneasily. Right after sipping the coffee they offered, reading the atmosphere, Tad asked, "What about Violet's belongings?" "Oh yes, this," I said, placing a photo on the table. Seeing the photo, Tad and the in-laws froze. "Tad, who is this woman?" No, I don't know her." In the photo, Tad and a woman were embracing in bed. "This was sent to our house recently, suggesting Tad's infidelity." At my words, the in-laws glared at Tad, and he frantically shook his head. "Wait, I don't remember this photo," Tad exclaimed. I watched Tad's reaction as I produced more photos. Each photo showed Tad kissing the woman or dating at a nearby amusement park. People who cheat don't say "I remember," as I murmured with downcast eyes. Mother-in-law raised her voice. You are just unbelievable." "Different, Mom. I don't know anything about this." "Lies. Then what are these photos about? You have a child with Nova, don't you?" "Child?" I quickly reacted to mother-in-law's words. Father-in-law opened his mouth awkwardly. Is this child the one you're talking about? Then is this woman Nova?" I said, presenting a photo of Tad holding a child. "No." The in-laws were at a loss for words, and Tad repeatedly yelled, "It's not true." But mother-in-law, this worst son, slapped Tad's cheek. "Did you have another child?" "Listen to me, Mom, Dad." However, mother-in-law and father-in-law didn't listen and repeatedly berated Tad for betraying their beloved grandchild. "What are you doing bringing these false photos here?" "I don't really understand either. They were sent to my house. So Tad, you have a child?" I glared sharply at Tad, who was at a loss for words. Well, honestly, Tad is right. Tad doesn't have another mistress besides Nova. I have no intention of telling them, as I don't want to be accused of defamation later, but these photos are composites that I had Riley make for me. I could have used actual photos of the real mistress and child, but I chose composites for a specific reason. I intended to press them about the child's existence and make them accidentally reveal the truth. But mother-in-law slipped up and spoke sooner than I expected, which was lucky. "Your silence means it's true, right? Earlier, Penelope also mentioned a child. And Nova, didn't she?" Tad was frozen, and then mother-in-law and father-in-law too, as I continued. "The information sent said these children are being cared for in this house." "That's not true." Mother-in-law interrupted my words with a denial. "Is that so?" "There's no way something so absurd could be true." "Then show me every room in the house." Without waiting for anyone's permission, I stood up and headed to the next room. "Wait, don't just pry into someone's house." Tad raised his voice. "If there's nothing to hide, just show me. Don't worry, I don't mind a bit of a mess." "That's not the point." "Then what's the problem?" Not waiting for Tad's answer, I pushed past mother-in-law and father-in-law's attempts to stop me and peered into the next room. Not here. So I headed upstairs. Despite some resistance and scraping my knee, it was nothing compared to Violet's pain. I can endure any wound for Violet. Breaking away from the in-laws and pushing past Tad, the moment I opened the door to an upstairs room, there they were. In the room, Nova and the child were sitting on the bed. Oh my, this woman and child are different from the photo. What does this mean? "This is..." Tad turned pale, and Nova, confused by photo, looked at us. "Yes, it seems Tad was cheating on Violet. Here, look at this photo." I showed Nova the composite photo, and her face twisted in anger as she crumpled it. "What is this? You had another woman?" "Wait, it's not like that. Nova, listen." Furious Nova and pale Tad. I seized the opportunity. So you're another one of Tad's women. Mother-in-law and father-in-law, overwhelmed by the situation, were holding their heads. Why? You said I was the main one, so I agreed not to marry and have your child, and there's another woman? It's different, Nova. This is probably some misunderstanding, someone who looks similar, or a composite. Probably. You can't say definitely not. I can't trust you. Nova's distrust reached its peak as Tad, confused, failed to deny properly. Such an indecisive man isn't worth trusting. Violet had her life ruined by this man. Nova's face stiffened at my heavy advice. Although Nova also played a part in disrupting life, she probably knows this given her expression, so there's no need to say it. For now, I must act as if I'm on Nova's side to make sure she listens to my words. All for my goal of not letting the in-laws, Nova, or anyone else be happy. Yes, that's right, Nova muttered. Wait, Nova, I'm serious about you. Tad desperately tried to persuade Nova, but I interrupted. So you weren't serious about Violet, but made vows in front of her? Tad, you're just not trustworthy. Nova's face clouded over at my words. It seemed she began to doubt whether what I was saying was sincere, especially with the composite photos in the mix. Good. If you were really serious, you wouldn't have been two-timing in the first place. No matter the reason, you'd stick to one person. As I conspicuously repeated my words, Nova's face grew increasingly darker. Tad's face had turned completely pale. He must have felt Nova's feelings slipping away. Let's break up, Tad. I don't want to be just a convenient woman for you. After seeing those photos, I just can't believe you anymore. I can tolerate being the second woman, but certainly not the third. Tad, stunned by Nova's tears, pulled her hand and shouted, Listen to me! But Nova shook off his hand, saying, I don't need acknowledgement anymore. Stay out of my life, and left the house with the child. Tad lost both the child and the woman he planned to marry, and as the in-laws sank into despair, I clenched my fist in triumph. Afterward, I made Tad write a termination of familial relations and cut ties with our family. Even Violet's inheritance, which Tad was supposed to receive, I made him relinquish. Our dad, who is quite imposing, went to the in-laws' house after hearing everything from me and protested. The in-laws, frightened, persuaded Tad. Just give up the inheritance. We don't want any more involvement with that house. It seems they persuaded Tad. Well, even though Violet's inheritance was modest, I didn't want to give even a cent of it to him, so that was good. Actually, on the day I took the photos to Tad's parents' home, one of the windows was open. As a result, our loud conversation was completely audible outside. That conversation, along with revelations from a friend of Nova's who lived nearby, spread throughout the neighborhood, and the in-laws' actions became well known. As a result, their house was rumored to have skewed morals, and Tad quit his job and left the town with the in-laws as if fleeing. Meanwhile, about 2 months later, Nova suddenly appeared at our parents' home. She came to thank me for opening her eyes and wanted to apologize for her past behavior towards Violet, bringing $50,000 for the apology. I should have acknowledged Nova's feelings, but the pain Violet suffered couldn't be resolved with money. It didn't seem right for us to accept money for something the person herself couldn't forgive. I appreciate your gratitude, but I don't want money from someone so I didn't accept it at all. Instead, I had her donate the money to a child welfare facility near where Violet worked, worried if she would actually donate. Of course, I accompanied her to ensure the donation was made. I'm sure Violet would be pleased with this use of the money. I hope those children will be happy, for Violet's sake. On the other hand, it's embarrassing to admit, but I struggled to move on after losing Violet, and even suffered from a mental breakdown. There was a time when it got so bad that I had to leave my job. But gradually I recovered. Now I'm working at Riley's investigation agency. Actually, after that incident, Riley and I became very close. We shared the experience of losing something precious, which I think made us understand each other. And despite my previous negative views on marriage due to what happened to Violet, I married my partner of 4 years last year. The pandemic and losing Violet made me realize how unpredictable life is, so I decided to take the step. I want to live without regrets, staying close to my loved ones as long as I can. Watch over me, Violet. I will live a long and full life for both of us, and when I get there, I'll tell you all the fun stories and things you didn't know. So, I'm going to keep living life energetically. Yeah.